Whatever Sony is building with next-gen Amethyst PSSR does not need to chase 8K to be impressive. Sony just revealed the Hyperpop Collection, and this thing is basically RGB energy bottled into console covers and controllers. Neon, loud, unapologetic. If your setup has LED strips anywhere near it, this was made for you. There are 3 colors, and yes, it's literally RGB. Techno, red. Remix, green. Rhythm, blue. These are not the usual muted PlayStation tones we're used to. These are turn the lights off and let the console glow colors. Sony straight up said the goal was to let the console take over your room. Inspired by RGB gaming setups, and honestly, they nailed it. Leo Cardoso from Sony's color, material, and finish design team even said they wanted these to go loud in the best possible way. And that's exactly what this feels like. It's not subtle, it's not trying to blend in, it's saying, yeah, this is a gaming setup, deal with it. Now here comes the pain. If you own a PlayStation 5 Pro, you're not invited. No covers, no RGB fun. Just you, your pro, and pure jealousy watching standard PS5 owners live their best neon life. Sony is also doing matching DualSense controllers for each color, because of course they are. If you're committing fully. Covers are $74.99. Controllers are $84.99. Limited quantities, and it all drops March 12th, with pre-orders starting January 16th at 10 a.m. local time through PlayStation Direct and select retailers. And now, my honest reaction. Grand Theft Auto 6 is one of those games that barely even needs marketing anymore. The second it drops, it's going to rewrite sales records, dominate the internet, and basically shut the industry down for a week. Everyone knows that. But here's the interesting part. It might not actually be done yet. On a recent episode of Button Mash, Jason Schreier from Bloomberg talked about where GTA 6 is in development right now. And what he said raised a few eyebrows. According to him, the last he heard, the game still wasn't content complete. That means teams are still finishing missions, locking down levels, and deciding what actually makes the final cut. That's important because content complete is a big milestone. It usually comes after feature complete and before full-on bug fixing. And even once a game hits that stage, developers are still tweaking, testing, and occasionally trying to sneak things in at the last minute if they think it improves the experience. So, yeah, this isn't a case of everything being wrapped up with a bow already. Originally, GTA 6 was targeting 2025, then it moved to May 2026. Now the current date sits at November 16th, 2026. And even that isn't set in stone. Schreier straight up said it's hard to say if Rockstar will hit that November window with absolute certainty. It feels more real than the previous dates, sure, but guaranteed is not a word anyone inside Rockstar is using. And that tracks. This is Rockstar Games we're talking about. They don't ship games to meet vibes or calendar pressure. They ship when it's ready. If something's not hitting their internal bar, it doesn't matter how close the date is, they'll move it. We've seen that playbook before. What gives them some breathing room is the fiscal year. Rockstar's parent company doesn't close the books until March 31st, which means even a late year or early next year adjustment still technically fits. That doesn't mean a delay is locked in, but it does mean they have options. And Rockstar always likes having options. So where does that leave us? GTA 6 feels closer than it ever has. The November date feels more grounded than the earlier targets. But at the same time, nobody should be shocked if it slips again. Perfection is the goal here. And Rockstar has never been shy about hitting the brakes if that's what it takes. If you've spent any time on social media lately, whether on Blue Sky or X, you've probably seen claims circulating that Microsoft is preparing to cut tens of thousands of jobs due to rising AI costs. Those claims spread fast, but they're now being pushed back on by Microsoft itself. The original report came from HUBRANX, which claimed Microsoft was considering layoffs ranging from 11,000 to 22,000 employees, allegedly impacting Azure Cloud, Xbox, and global sales teams. As As the story gained traction online, Jez Corden of Windows Central publicly stated that the report was false, at least as far as Xbox was concerned. Not long after, Microsoft's Chief Communications Officer Frank X. Shaw also stepped in to dismiss the claims outright. Shaw didn't just deny the report, he actively engaged with critics in the replies, even saying he eagerly awaits the news he insists is incorrect. That hasn't stopped skepticism. Both Corden and Shaw's posts were met with heavy pushback, largely because of Microsoft's recent history with layoffs. And that context matters. In July 2025, Microsoft did in fact lay off around 9,000 employees. At the time, Xbox head Phil Spencer described those cuts as necessary for long-term success. Several projects were canceled, studios were shut down, and the company framed the move as a way to increase agility and effectiveness. What makes this situation even more confusing for people is that despite those layoffs, Microsoft still reached a $4 trillion valuation later in July 2025. So while it's absolutely possible that Microsoft could cut more jobs in the future, there is currently no confirmed evidence supporting claims of imminent mass layoffs on the scale being shared online. Back in early 2023, Microsoft downplayed layoff chatter before eventually confirming 10,000 job cuts across multiple divisions. In mid-2024, reports about restructuring inside Xbox were brushed off as speculation, only for studio closures and project cancellations to be announced shortly after. Even in 2025, smaller waves of job cuts were initially framed as isolated or routine adjustments, before turning into the confirmed 9,000 layoffs that hit Xbox and other teams in July. This isn't unique to Microsoft, but they've definitely leaned into the strategy of denying until the announcement window is locked. From a corporate perspective, it makes sense. You don't want panic internally, you don't want stock volatility, and you don't want headlines until everything is finalized. But from the outside, it trains people not to take denials at face value. So when rumors surface about cuts tied to AI spending, Azure margins, or restructuring inside Xbox, people don't immediately dismiss them. They remember the pattern. Deny today, confirm later. Next up, this one's spicy. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella wants people to stop calling AI slop. He's been blogging on his new site, talking about how 2026 is going to be a pivotal year for AI. Not the hype phase anymore, but the phase where we separate spectacle from substance, figure out real-world impact, and decide how this tech actually fits into society. Big words, thoughtful framing, very CEO core. He says we're past discovery and into mass diffusion. That AI capability is racing ahead of our ability to actually use it properly, that we need to move beyond the slop versus sophistication argument and rethink how humans interact when these tools are everywhere. He also talks about responsibility, about choosing where AI energy and compute should go, about earning societal permission. Cool. All sounds very noble on paper. But here's the problem. It's almost impossible to use Microsoft's ecosystem without AI being shoved in your face. Windows 11, Microsoft Copilot, Office, cloud services, pop-ups, nags, forced integrations. AI isn't something you opt into. It's something you wrestle with. And that's where the slop label comes from. Maybe people would stop calling it slop if Windows didn't advertise to me like a free mobile game, even though I paid full price for the OS. Maybe stop throwing ads on my desktop while I'm working. Maybe let me uninstall your cloud storage app instead of forcing it and auto-uploading my files. Maybe don't warn me that I'm out of storage when I have 8 terabytes locally sitting right there. Maybe stop pushing Word 365 when I use Google Docs for free and it works better for what I need. Maybe stop reinstalling Copilot every time I remove it. Maybe stop stuffing background services into my system until my expensive PC feels like it's running on Pentium-era energy. People don't call AI slop because they hate technology. They call it slop because it's forced, intrusive, half-baked, and constantly getting in the way of basic computing. You want AI to earn respect. Make it invisible when I don't need it. Make it optional. Make it useful without hijacking my OS. All right, next up, DLSS 4.5 is actually crushing it right now, and I don't say that lightly. At this point, NVIDIA is so far ahead of AMD on the GPU side that it's not even funny anymore. If you're sitting on a 50 series card, especially anything with 16 gigabytes of VRAM, DLSS 4.5 just made that purchase feel way smarter overnight. Not in a marketing way, in a real, measurable, daily use kind of way. And here's the thing people keep missing. I'm not even a PC gamer first. My rig is a workstation. Editing, rendering, encoding, multitasking, real productivity stuff. And even from that angle, I'm sitting here going, wow. NVIDIA just keeps iterating while everyone else is still catching their breath. DLSS was already impressive. It was already at the point where you could flip it on and forget about it. DLSS 4.5, though, that's where things start getting uncomfortable for the competition. Because now we're in this weird space where the output can actually look cleaner than native in certain scenarios. Think about how insane that sounds. For years, native was the untouchable gold standard. Everything else was a compromise. Now, you've got upscaling that can reduce shimmer, stabilize fine detail, clean up motion, and in some cases, give you a better image than brute force rendering. That's not magic. That's software maturity. Then I look over at the 9070 XT and I feel nothing. No excitement. No curiosity. No, maybe I should try this. Just a big card, big power draw, and performance that doesn't justify either. And that's why I'm really hoping whatever Sony and AMD are building together with Amethyst for PS6 ends up being something special. Because AMD on PC GPUs right now, it's not it, especially once you factor in efficiency. Power matters now. Thermals matter now. Noise matters now. Longevity matters now. There's a reason I went NVIDIA for my workstation. Video encoding is on another level. CUDA cores actually get used. DLSS wasn't just a gaming feature, it was a platform advantage. DLSS 4.5 just widens that gap even more. And yeah, RIP FSR, at least where it currently stands. Even an 8GB NVIDIA card, even a laptop GPU can outperform a big, power-hungry 16GB 9070 XT in video encoding and non-gaming workloads. That part is important because gaming benchmarks aren't the whole story anymore. People stream, edit, clip, record, encode, export, and NVIDIA dominates that space. Now, let's talk about what's actually coming next, because this is the part I'm genuinely excited about. Dynamic multi-frame generation, FG6X, is landing in the spring. This isn't fake frames everywhere all the time. This is targeted, intelligent frame generation. You aim for 120 frames per second. You dip to 100. The system fills the gap just enough to stabilize motion, then backs off. That's the difference. That's the moment where frame generation stops feeling gimmicky and starts feeling useful. You're not inflating numbers for screenshots. You're smoothing real gameplay in real time. That's a killer feature. Right now, if you want DLSS 4.5 applied globally, it's actually pretty easy. Update your NVIDIA drivers, enable beta features in the NVIDIA app, go into global graphics settings, and force the DLSS override model to latest. Done. Any compatible game pulls the newest DLSS model automatically. Some games, immediate difference. Others, barely noticeable. Expedition 33 is a good example. That game already runs great natively, so DLSS doesn't transform it, and that's fine. That's how it should work. DLSS isn't supposed to fix well-optimized games. It's supposed to elevate the hard ones. Where things get interesting is image quality. There are tests showing DLSS 4.5 quality mode producing a cleaner image than native, at the cost of about 10 frames per second instead of gaining frames. And to me, that's a fair trade. Less shimmer, better reconstruction, more stability in motion. It genuinely feels like black magic when you see it live. And this is where the online backlash loses me. Most people are judging this through YouTube compression. Of course, it looks the same in a video. You cannot see temporal stability, micro detail, or motion clarity through a compressed stream. You have to feel it. Same exact story as PS5 versus PS5 Pro. On YouTube, everything looks identical. In motion with a controller in your hands, it's a different experience entirely. A 1080 native game can look better live than a 4K YouTube upload. That's just reality. And that's where the AMD discourse goes off the rails. Months of hype, influencers losing their minds over the 9070 XT. Then you actually look at the numbers. Power draw is high. Encoding is worse. Ray tracing falls apart. Upscaling isn't competitive. And long-term support feels like a question mark if history repeats itself. FSR 4 still doesn't compete with DLSS 4 plus ray reconstruction. And the whole buy AMD to support AMD argument? Nah, I'm not buying hardware out of charity. I'm buying what serves my needs today and still makes sense years from now. Sony is the lifeline here. PSSR, Amethyst, all of it. That tech is the reason FSR 4 even gets close to DLSS 4.0 in some cases. Without consoles, AMD's GPU story on PC would look a lot rougher. To be clear, AMD AMD dominates CPUs. AMD dominates APUs and laptops. They deserve credit for that. But GPUs? Stop shipping massive cards that suck power for marginal gains. Stop half-baked FSR versions. Stop pricing a card $30 cheaper than a 5060 Ti and calling it competitive. Here's why this is exciting tech, even if you're a PS5 gamer looking ahead at what the PS6 could bring to the table. Yeah, of course, Nvidia is ahead of the curve right now. No one's denying that. But to actually experience this stuff the way it's meant to be experienced, you need a 50 series card with 16 gigabytes of VRAM, minimum. Then you need the rest of the rig to keep up. Realistically, you're talking about a $1,500 setup, and that's before we even touch RAM prices. Once you factor those in, that number creeps closer to $2,000 pretty fast. That's the part that matters, because consoles don't work like that. What makes this exciting for PS5 players is not that PS6 is going to copy Nvidia feature for feature. It won't. It doesn't need to. What matters is that this entire generation is proving something important. Raw horsepower is no longer the only path forward. Smart reconstruction, temporal upscaling, and intelligent frame management are doing more heavy lifting than ever before. That's where Project Amethyst comes in. We know very little about PS6 Amethyst tech right now, but we know enough to see the direction. Sony and AMD are clearly focused on reconstruction quality, not brute force. I'm not talking about 6x frame generation or chasing ridiculous benchmark numbers. I'm talking about cleanup scaling, stable motion, and consistent frame pacing. That's the real win. At this point, I'm almost certain there will be some form of dynamic frame generation on PS6. Not the PC-style always-on approach, but something smarter, something that only steps in when needed. Think about it. You target 4K at 120 frames per second on a 65-inch TV. The game dips. Instead of stutter, instead of blur, the system quietly fills the gap, just enough to keep motion smooth. And the key part here is quality, not a blurry mess, not artifact soup, not latency hell. Sony already showed with PSSR that they care about image integrity. PS6 is going to build on that, not abandon it. And when you combine high-quality upscaling with dynamic frame assistance, suddenly those 4K 120 FPS targets stop sounding like marketing nonsense and start sounding achievable. That's why DLSS 4.5 matters beyond PC. The push for 8K in the next console generation is mostly noise, not progress. Higher resolution on its own does not fix the things that actually break immersion when you're playing. Pop-in, shimmering, ghosting, unstable motion, uneven frame pacing. None of that disappears just because you quadruple the pixel count. 8K massively increases rendering costs. It stresses memory bandwidth, caches, streaming systems, and reconstruction pipelines. If the underlying image is unstable, all you get is a higher resolution version of the same problems. In motion, it can even look worse because fine artifacts become more noticeable, not less. Most visual issues players complain about are not caused by a lack of pixels. Pop-in is about asset streaming, CPU scheduling, decompression, and how fast the engine can move data from storage into memory. Shimmering comes from weak anti-aliasing and poor temporal stability, especially with foliage, thin geometry, and specular highlights. Ghosting is tied to reconstruction quality, motion vectors, and how transparencies and fast movement are handled. None of these are solved by pushing resolution higher. What players actually respond to is image clarity and stability. A clean image in motion, edges that do not crawl, detail that holds up at distance, highlights that look controlled instead of noisy, a world that stays visually consistent as you move through it. That is fidelity, and it can absolutely be achieved at 4K with the right implementations. A well-executed 4K presentation today is not just about native resolution. It is about reconstruction that does not wobble, anti-aliasing tuned for motion, rather than screenshots, clean motion vectors, fast and predictable streaming, stable LOD transitions, and proper HDR tone mapping. When those pieces come together, 4K on a large TV looks sharp enough that the 8K discussion stops mattering. Development time also matters. Every hour spent chasing pixel count is an hour not spent fixing traversal stutter, foliage shimmer, RT noise, or frame pacing issues. For the next generation, the priority should be better 4K, not marketed 8K. It's also worth saying that you don't even need native 4K to get a great image if the rendering stack is done properly. 1440 with the right graphical settings can look excellent on a large TV or monitor, especially when reconstruction and anti-aliasing are solid. solid. Even 4K with DLSS balanced, which often runs at an internal 1080 resolution and reconstructs upward, can look shockingly good in the right scenarios and the right games. When motion is stable and the input image is clean, your eyes care far more about clarity than raw pixel count. Where this completely falls apart is poor optimization. Games like Borderlands 4 and Monster Hunter Wilds do not benefit from this argument at all. Those titles are some of the worst optimized releases we've seen in the last couple of years. Heavy shimmer, unstable image reconstruction, inconsistent frame pacing, and aggressive LOD issues mean that no amount of upscaling wizardry is going to save the presentation. When the base image is messy, reconstruction just exposes the mess more clearly. But when you look at a game built around high fidelity and photorealistic rendering, the story changes completely. Take Cyberpunk 2077 with path tracing enabled. That's a perfect example of where technologies like DLSS 4.5 actually shine. The base image is dense, lighting information is rich, motion vectors are clean, and reconstruction has real data to work with. In that kind of environment, upscaling is not a compromise, it's an enabler. Whatever Sony is building with next-gen Amethyst PSSR does not need to chase 8K to be impressive.